In this video, I'll be showing you how to make the new Skinny Snake Bracelet using the Rainbow Loom. So you want your loom to be set up with the pins in a staggered position so they're not in line with one another, and you want the arrows to be facing towards you so that all of the open ends are facing you. And as far as the bands go, you will need 34 bands for the snake of whatever color you want it to be, so I've chosen red. And then if you want to make stripes on your snake, and I'm going to show you how to do that, you will need 5 bands for that, so I've chosen black. And then I am going to use a red rubber band with 2 black beads placed on it for the eyes. But if you don't have beads or you don't want to use beads and you just have bands, you can use 2 additional black bands to make the eyes. And then for the background color, I've chosen white. And you're going to need 65 bands for this, plus you're going to need a few additional bands for the extension because it's not going to be long enough to go around your entire wrist. So I would say you would need about 6 to 10 more bands for that. And then I've chosen 1 pink band that's going to be for the tongue. And normally I would use red, but since the snake is already red, I've chosen pink. So I'm going to begin by placing the snake on the loom first. And we're going to do the head first. So I'm taking a red band and I want the first 2 bands to be doubled. So in order to do that, I'm placing it on my hook, twisting and putting it back on. So you see 2 rubber bands on the hook. I'm going to go to the second pin down on the left side of the loom, and this band is going to stretch diagonally down and to the right to this middle row, and it's going to be a long stretch. So it's going from that second pin on the left-hand row, and it's stretching down to the 4th pin from the top on the middle row. And now I'm taking my next rubber band, which again is going to be red. I'm doubling this one as well, so I'm placing it on my hook, twisting and putting it back on. And this one is going to stretch from the 3rd pin down on the left side of the loom. It's going diagonally up and to the right into that center row. It's a long stretch. It's going to be on the 2nd pin down from the top in that middle row. It's just going to make an X. And again, no twisting, and push down. And now for the second layer, I'm going to outline these 5 pins. So I'm going to start on the left-hand side. I'm just going to take 1 band. I don't need to double anymore. And just go to that next pin up, and then I'm just going to work my way around these 5 pins. And then back to the start. And so now that I have 2 layers on, I want to remove the bottom layer of bands. So I'll start on the left-hand side here. I'm grabbing the bottom 2 bands. This was the doubled band, taking them both at once, and it is going to be tight, pulling that over the top and into the middle. And just make sure that these upper bands do not come off as you're doing that, since this is tight and it will want to pull those off. Then I'm going to the next pin up, again grabbing the bottom 2 bands. Flip to the other side, and you're going to have to grab these from the outside, grabbing the bottom 2, pulling them off and into the middle. And there's nothing to do on this center pin because there was no band placed there for the first layer. So down to the next pin, you're grabbing the bottom 2 bands, pulling them out and into the middle. And then push this down. And now I'm going to add another layer doing that same pattern. So I will start on the left-hand side, and I'm just going to again outline the shape of these 5 pins. Now coming back down, and then back to the start. And now again I want to remove the bottom layer of bands. And it's going to again be 2 rubber bands at once. So I'm just grabbing them both on my hook, pulling out over the top and into the middle. Just going to do that for all 5 pins. Again, I'm having to grab from the outside, pulling it over and into the center. And I do have 2 bands on this middle pin this time. And then down at the bottom here, and then push down. And so that is it for the head. And so now what I'm going to do is turn my loom around so the arrows are facing away from me. And now I want to put the bands on for the body. So for this part, I'm going to be using 2 bands at once. So I'm just taking 2 rubber bands and putting them together like they're just one band. I'm starting in the middle, and I'm just going to go to that next pin up in the center row and push down. And now I'm going to work my way back and forth across the loom. So again, I'll take 2 rubber bands, and from the center pin, I'm going to go to the right diagonally. And now I'm going from this pin straight ahead. And then from here, I'm going to go to the left into that center row. And now from here, I'm moving straight ahead again. And now I'm going back to the right. And then straight ahead. And now to the left. And straight. And back to the right. And then straight ahead. And now I am going to add the stripes to the snake, and if you don't want to add stripes, you just can skip this part. And so I'm going to take a black rubber band, I'm going to take my hook, and I'm going to add the stripes on all bands that went diagonally. So I'm just taking my hook and placing it underneath this red band, both bands, both sides of the band. And I'm going to grab this black rubber band with my hook. I'm going to pull it under and then put it on top. I'm going to put this loose end that's in my fingers back on the hook so now you can see the 2 bands on. I'm going to pull the one end through the other. It's going to make a slip knot. And now I am going to just place this on the pin to the right. So I'm going to do that for every one of these diagonal bands. So here's another one. So I'm reaching my hook underneath these both sides of the band, grabbing this black band, pulling it under, and I'm keeping this held with my fingers, coming up the top, putting the end that's in my fingers on the hook, and then the one end is going to pull through the other to make that slip knot. And I am going to place this band diagonally to the right. And I'm just going to work my way up here. So I'll go to this next diagonal band, get my hook underneath, grab the black rubber band, pull it under, put the other end on the hook, pull the one through the other, and I'm going to place that diagonally to the right. Move up to the next one, get my hook under, grab the black band, pull it under and over to the top, get the other end back on, pull it through, and place the loop on the pin to the right. And I have one more to do here. I'm going underneath, pulling this black band under, and then getting the other end on, pulling one end through the other, and placing that right on the pin to the right. So now I want to go back to the start, and I still want the arrows to be facing away from me. And now I'm going to place on the background bands. So again, for this part, I'm always going to be using 2 bands at once. I'm going to start in the center here, and I'm going to place these 2 bands out to the right. And now I'm just going to work my way up both rows of pins. So I'll go to the one on the right here, and I'm always taking 2 bands, and I'm always going to the next pin up. And I'll be doing the same thing in the center row as well. I'm just going to work on them both at once here. So I will fast forward. And so I've gone to the very end in both rows, and now I want to take another set of bands and place it from the center pin out to the right and push that down. You want to make sure that all of this is pushed down to the bottom of the pins, because we're going to need to add the cap bands that's going to hold the 2 rows together. And so now I'm starting back at the beginning, the arrow's still facing away from me, and all of these bands are going to be doubled. So I'm placing it on my hook, twisting, putting it back on. I'm not doing anything on the very end, so I'll go to that next pin up, and I'm just placing that from the middle pin and then out to the right. And I'm just going to do that for the length of the loom, always with a doubled band. And I'm not going to do one on the very end because we already had placed bands there. And now on the last pin on the right hand side here, I want to place a cap band. So it's just going to be a doubled band, and it's going to go right on the top of this end pin. And now I am going to turn the loom around so the arrows are facing towards me, and it's time to start looping the bands. So we're going to start on the left hand side here, and you can see on this pin there are 2 bands on top. That's the doubled band that we just placed on. The next set of bands goes out to the right, and then the bottom set of bands goes forward. So we're just going to work our way in order. I'm going to go down through the middle of the pin, push back on the top 2 bands, grab those next 2 bands in line. I want to hold this cap band in place, and those bands are going to go out and to the right. Now I'm going to go back down through this same pin, push back on those top 2 bands, grab the bottom 2, again I'm holding this in place, and they are going to move forward. And so now I'll just work my way up the left side of the loom. And so you're always going to have this cap band that's on top. So you always want to make sure when you're putting your hook down through the middle that those 2 bands are behind your hook. And so now I'm going to grab the next 2 bands, they're my background bands, which are white, and I'm going to move them forward. And now I need to go back down through this same pin, getting those top white bands to go behind my hook. This time I'm grabbing the 2 red bands, and they are going to come out and move forward as well. And now on the next pin, again I'm making sure those top 2 white bands are behind my hook. I'm grabbing the next 2 bands, that's the background bands, and they are moving forward. And now I have that black band, which is for the stripe. Now if you didn't add stripes, you won't have this band, and I want that to move forward. And now again I want the bottom 2 red bands to come out and move ahead. So these pins are very full. Now on this next pin we only have the 2 white bands to move ahead. And here we have another pin that has snake bands on. So you're pushing back on the top 2, and you want the 2 white bands to move ahead. And now I'm going back down through, and I'm going to grab the black band. That's my stripe band. And now I'm going back down through again, and you see that there are 4 red rubber bands on this pin. we only want the bottom 2 red rubber bands. So I want you to push back on the top 2, grabbing just those bottom 2. And on this next pin again, you want to grab the 2 background bands and move them up. And now you have the striped band, this black band. And going back down through, again you only want the bottom 2 red. And now we have a band that doesn't have any snake parts on it, so it's just the white. And here we have more snake, so there's the 2 background bands, the white bands. And now you're going back down through for the black band, or whatever color your stripe is, if you even have one. And now again, you're going to see 4 red bands. We only want the bottom 2, so you're getting those top 2 red to go behind your hook, grabbing the bottom 2, and moving them out and forward. And now again, pushing back on the top 2, you have the 2 white background bands. And now you want the striped band. And then finally the 2 bottom red bands. So it might be a little bit tricky just because there are so many bands you're dealing with. And now for this one we have just the white. And now we're on to the head of the snake. So I have the 2 white bands. And then I'm going back down through and I want the 2 red bands to move ahead. And then again the same thing on the next pin. You want all 4 of these bands to move ahead, the 2 white and now the 2 red. And now on this last pin we have just the 2 white that are going to move out and diagonally to that center row. And so now we're going to go back to the start and we're going to continue with that same pattern as we did in the first row. So I am going to go down through the end pin, get those top 4 white bands to go behind my hook, grabbing just the bottom 2. And on the next pin again we have just the white. And now we have the bands with the snake on, but at least we won't have to worry about any of the striped bands in this row. So you want to grab the white bands to come forward. And now you're going back down through. And again you're pushing back on the top 2 red bands, only grabbing the bottom 2. And again on the next pin you're going to have 4 bands to move ahead. You have the background bands and then the bottom 2 snake bands. And for this next one we have just the white. Now again on this next one you have the top 2 white bands. And now the bottom 2 red bands. So you're pushing back on the top 2 red, make sure they get behind your hook and you're only grabbing the bottom. And for this next one we have white and then red also. And now just white. And now we're going to have 4 on this one. Just those bottom 2 red. And then again 4 on this next one. And now we're up to the head of the snake. So you're still having all 4 bands to move forward. And here we have the white. And finally, these last 2 red bands. And you're done. So now we're going to take the snake off of the loom. So I'll start here at the other end, and I'm just going to carefully put my hook down inside and release this. So I will fast forward here. And now before I take the last couple bands off of the loom, I'm going to take my hook and put it down through this middle pin and push it out to the side. I'm going to take another white rubber band and get it on my hook and then pull it up through. And I'm going to be putting this other end that's in my fingers back on the hook. So I have the 2 bands on, and now I can pull this off the rest of the way. And then here's what your snake looks like. And you might have to just take a minute and stretch the bands out, get them nice and tight. It gets a little bit out of shape from getting pulled off of the loom. And now what you want to do is add an extension. So I'm just going to put this aside for now. And I'm going to take my loom. I want the arrows to be facing away from me. And I'm just going to take 4 additional bands. I'm going to start on the bottom of the right-hand row. I'm only going to be working in this one row. And they're just going to be going one right after the other. And now I'm going to take these 2 white bands that are on my hook, and I'm just going to place them as the next band. And now I'm just going to reach my hook inside and grab that band and pull it back towards myself. And I'll just keep doing that till I get to the end. This is just going to make a single chain. And now I want my hook to go down inside both of these bands and pull it off. I'm going to take a clip. I have an S clip here. And I'm going to hook these bands through one side of the clip. Now I'm going to go to the other side, and I'm going to put my hook through just a couple of the bands on the end. I'm going to take another rubber band, pull it through, and put it back on. Set this aside, and now I'll do 4 more bands. This is going to be the other half of my extension. You may not need as many bands as this, or you may need a few extra. Just depends on the size of your wrist. And so now I'm going to place, again, these 2 white bands on and stretch them out. And now I'm just reaching inside and pulling back. And then again, I'm putting my hook in through the middle, and I can take this off of the loom. And now I want those bands to be hooked through the other side of the clip. And then here is my snake bracelet. So we still have to add the eyes, and you have a couple of different options for that. If you have googly eyes, you can use those. You can just glue them on. Just make sure that you use a glue that will adhere to the rubber. And if you have beads, you can string the beads onto a rubber band, and then we can just place that rubber band on and pull the ends through the back and just secure that in place. And if you need to know how to string beads onto a rubber band, you can check out my video that I have for that. If you only have rubber bands, what you can do is find where you want the eye to be, and then take your hook and go underneath a couple of bands. And you just take the rubber band, get it on your hook and pull it through. Place the other end back on your hook, pull one end through the other. That will make a slip knot. And then what you're going to have to do is take your hook and go in from the back. You want to get it right next to that black band, and you want to grab it and pull it down through. It's a little bit tricky. You want to try not to hook any other bands, and then you have this black band sticking out the bottom, and you can see where the eye would be. But then you're just going to have to secure this somehow. You can either get a clip and hook it in place. So I'm actually going to take this out, and I'm going to hook the beaded band on. So I'm going to take my hook and go in from the back, and I want my hook to come up through where I want one part of the band to go. So I'm going to hook that on my hook, and I'm going to pull these bands and try and get this to come out the back without hooking other bands that I don't want. And now I'm going to take a clip. I have a C-clip here that I'm going to hook this band through. And now I'm going to go on the other side where I want the other part of the band to come down through. So I'm going to push my hook up through. I'm going to grab the other part of this band, and again I'm going to try and stretch this out and pull that down through, and I want to get it hooked on the clip as well. And then now my snake has his eyeballs. So you may have to adjust it a little bit. If you want the beads to be closer together, you can slide them, or if it needs to twist to be even with one another. And so there are his eyes. And then the last thing we're going to do is add the tongue. So I'm just going to go on the front of the snake, take my hook and put it through some of these bands in the front. I'm going to take this pink band and pull it through, put the other end of the loop on the hook, and I'm just sliding one through the other to make that slip knot, and I'm just going to pull that sort of tightly, and now he has his tongue. And if you want, you can cut this band because they do have a forked tongue. So you would just take some scissors and just snip this on the end. And if you wanted, you could tie this again, just like the way you would tie your shoes. Make a loop and pull one end through the other. And then he would have his forked tongue. So that is the Skinny Snake Bracelet. And I will show you another one that I had made. So for this one, I used black as the background, and then I had turquoise bands for the snake, and I used the white bands for the stripes. So that is the Skinny Snake Bracelet. I hope that everyone enjoyed this tutorial. You can always leave me comments on YouTube and Facebook, post pictures of your creations to my Facebook page, and please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can stay up to date on all of my latest tutorials. You can also find me on Pinterest and Instagram, so please feel free to subscribe to those as well. Thanks for watching!